So imagine a race where about everyone is just a normal human. But then there's this one person who's on a horse and they're going at the fastest pace possible. But then suddenly, mid race, their horse breaks down and they kind of never get to see the end of it. That is kind of how Sumerian civilization went. Hello everyone, and I am Advaith, your host for the History of Humankind. And as a host, it's my responsibility to remind you of what we discussed in the previous episode. So, let me recollect. Ooh, I remember paintings of bisons and cattle. No, fast forward a little more. Oh, important professions and their emergence? No, I said forward, not backward. Ooh, now I remember. Jericho. Which, by the way, I totally mispronounced in the last episode. It's either Jericho or Jericho, but definitely not Jericho. We were talking about the tiny civilizational emergence of Jericho, a civilization that failed to mobilize. Around the same time, that is 4000 BCE, a similar civilization started to develop. That was the Sumerian civilization. But before we jump in, let's discuss the land and location. Sumer came under the jurisdiction of an area called Mesopotamia. It was basically the landmass that lied between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. In fact, the word Mesopotamia itself means between the rivers in Greek. Also, a very oddly specific detail about the Sumerians that I found in every research book that I looked at was the fact that they were called black-headed people because they basically just had dark hair. Sumerian evolution was staggering. They had developed a lot of professions and jobs and hence had a very diverse social culture. The family in Sumer was a very important unit. The father often worked in cultivating the fields while the mother took care of the children. The children would often be found happily playing in the streets, but after being of a certain age, they too had to begin smaller trade professions. Sumer also had a class system, something that worked its way up until the modern era. At the bottom were the slaves, who were often prisoners of war from other cities. In between were the middle classes, who were the normal people, traders, craftsmen, sculptors, etc. And at the top were the priests, who were seen as the messengers of God. The priests were kind of like the wise men of the village. They were often called upon to solve disputes, prescribe medicines, and even give lectures in the temples. They were kind of the social epicenter of everything in the village. The villagers believed that in order to keep the city happy, the gods had to be kept happy, and hence their messengers, the priests, were to be kept happy. The middle classes, however, did the most amount of work. They often kept the city stocked with grains and food so that there was never a shortage, and sometimes even supplied the priests with wealth by paying taxes. The craftsmen used their skills to decorate the temples and other city buildings, while the sculptors carved exquisite statues. The carpenters worked on new architecture, and the smiths worked on jewelry and precious stones. The ones who led the worst lives, however, were the slaves, who were often prisoners of war from other cities. They worked in the houses of the rich, emptied the streets, and emptied the rubbish. However, they had the chance to be free by paying a huge load of money to their owners. The class, however, which was exempted from all of these duties were the kings. Earlier in Sumer, there were actually no kings, and the cities were ran by chief priests. However, the business of the city proved too much for just one chief priest, and hence the priests slowly started becoming the king makers and chose a king from the population. The king took care of business which did not involve the temple, such as maintaining public order and public buildings. The leading city in Sumer was the city of Ur. No clear dynasties can be traced back considering the city's age. However, we do know a little about such dynasties. The city of Ur was filled with conquests and dynasties. A basic chart went something like this. In about 2370 BCE, a Semitic king by the name of Sargon I took over the city of Ur. His family reigned for 120 years. His grandson, who proclaimed himself the king of 4 quarters of the world, which, by the way, was a very cheeky way to say that he was the ruler of the whole world, Naram-Sin was eventually defeated by Sumerian rebels, mostly natives and prisoners of war. However, up until 2000 BCE, Sumer would remain in utter chaos as many kings came and went until the fall of the Sumerian Empire, which, however, led to the rise of another civilization, the Babylonian civilization, a topic perhaps for a future video, so stay tuned for that. Coming back, the Sumerian Empire had an edge over its enemies because of its magnificent architecture. The Sumerians were different than most other civilizations as they were not just farmers but also builders. They were in fact the first to make bricks. These bricks proved to be more and more resistant, as a few accounts show that there were buildings which were 2 stories tall. In fact, illustrations also depict that there were pavements and courtyards. Staggering progress for it being 4000 BCE. They were also the first to build boats. They were built out of plaited reeds and were covered with animal skin. Hence, they had just eased trade. They no longer had to rely on their allies of the land but could trade across rivers. This was a milestone in human development. Excavations led to the discovery of marvelous architecture in the city of Ur. One such marvel was the ziggurat of Ur, which literally meant man-made mountain of Ur. The ziggurat was 75 feet tall and was made out of millions of Sumerian bricks. It must have taken a lot of effort. But you may be asking, why so much effort? Well, for that, let's look into the art and culture. Originally, the Sumerians had 5 gods. They governed natural bodies which they saw at the time. The earth governed by Enlil, the sky governed by Anu, the water governed by Ea, the sun governed by Shamash, and the moon governed by Nannar. Villages would often have their local gods but would also worship these 5 gods in common. The ziggurat was built for Nannar, the moon god. That answers the question, whom was it built for? But that still begs the question, why? Couldn't they have just built a normal sculpture? Well, the Sumerians were very religious. They believed that gods were just human in form and hence needed a home, shelter and food. Hence, they built the ziggurat as a home and furnished it. Inside the ziggurat was a huge sculpture of Nannar, who was the moon god. Interestingly, all the bricks contain a name, Ur-Nannu, which was most probably the name of the king who built the ziggurat. But that begs the question, did he actually write it in simple English for us to understand? No, they had their own language, which was later to be called cuneiform. Cuneiform actually means wedge-shaped writing and is written on soft clay tablets using plaited reeds. Early cuneiform used symbols to depict things. This, however, proved to be extremely difficult because obviously you can't name every single thing in existence. Hence, they started coming up with a standard alphabet and hence laying the foundation for modern language. This chart shows the rough translations for each letter. So this is kind of a comparison between Sumerian alphabet and English alphabet and what sounds these letters made compared to English alphabet. Also, keep in mind that cuneiform was not standard like modern day English, for example. English would be the same anywhere around the world. But cuneiform had its own regional variations, such as this one and this one. So, dear viewers, what did we learn today? First, we learned about Mesopotamia, what it means and where it lies. Next, after discussing a very oddly specific detail about Sumer, we spoke about the social classes and social culture in Sumer. Then we dived into the world of conflict, then talking about the marvelous buildings in Sumer, and finally landing on art and culture. So dear viewers, we will be talking about the land of the pharaohs in the next episode. So stay tuned for that one. Till then, I'm your host Advaith signing off. If you enjoyed the video, then please make sure to like, subscribe and click the bell icon so you remain notified. If you know someone who is interested in topics like these, please do share the video. And if you have any suggestions or questions to ask me, you can either email me at the given email address in the description, or you can just drop it in the comments down below.